Welcome back to W5. And we continue with our investigation into what happens when innocent people are wrongly convicted. We've just seen how the flawed evidence of one pathologist can potentially convict people who are not guilty. Now, in part 2 of our investigation, we ask the question, what happens after the justice system admits it was wrong, when someone who was sent to jail is exonerated? In recent years, a growing number of wrongfully convicted have been set free after authorities suddenly say, oops, we made a mistake. But what happens after the publicity dies down and they try to pick up their shattered lives? Here again is Victor Malarek with the Victims of Justice.
David Milgaard, convicted of murder, served 23 years. Donald Marshall Jr., convicted of murder, served 11 years. Clayton Johnson, convicted of murder, served 5 years. Michel Dumont, convicted of kidnapping and armed sexual assault, served 3 years. Guy Paul Moran, convicted of murder, served 1.5 years. It's a select club totaling about 30 members so far, all men, and the membership is growing. But this is a club that not one of these men ever wanted to join. All serve sentences for crimes they didn't commit. Today, they are free men, having been exonerated. For many wrongfully convicted, reestablishing a life outside prison is difficult. They say they have trouble finding jobs, reconnecting with loved ones, and figuring out how to trust people again. And even though they may be free, they may never be free of the stigma. They come out into a world where every whisper on the outside brings them back behind bars.
When I got out of prison, I was a black and white person.
You either trust or you don't trust?
Nothing in between.
Thomas Sophonow walked out of prison after serving 4 years for a crime he didn't commit.
Who's the picker-upper?
Today, he's renovating this heritage home in New Westminster, just outside Vancouver.
Good, thank you.
And despite 25 years of freedom, he still carries a lot of pain.
Until I can overcome my mental block and talk about issues, it'll always be there. But I'm not there yet.
And it still hurts when he recalls the day a former co-worker at a railroad company stuck a note on his back for a joke. In bold letters, it said, "Murderer." He walked around most of the day with no one saying a word.
It must have ticked you off.
Yeah, I did. I don't know. Actually, I don't know when it was put on, but at lunchtime, I know, well, somebody would have had to have said something.
It's like walking around with a sticker on your back that says, "Kick me."
Yeah, exactly.
And there's no reason to kick.
No.
20 years ago, W5 first reported on the case of Thomas Sophonow.
You did not do it.
No, I didn't.
How do you feel about the fact that there is somebody there, out there, who did?
He's just laughing at this whole ordeal, getting off scot-free.
16-year-old waitress Barbara Stoppel was found strangled and left for dead in a washroom at this donut shop on December 23, 1981. She died 6 days later in hospital. 3 months later, Sophonow was charged with her murder, even though he had an alibi and no physical evidence linking him to the attack. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And all the while, Sophonow maintained his innocence. 4 years later, in 1985, Sophonow was set free and released from prison after the Manitoba Court of Appeal unanimously overturned his conviction.
What do you want to see happen now?
I want to see the Minister of Justice give direction to the Solicitor General and have the RCMP investigate the circumstances and the way it was handled by the Winnipeg Police, and how I can sit in prison for 4 years for something I didn't do.
But it would be 15 years before the Manitoba government finally called for a public inquiry and issued an apology to
I'm very pleased with the announcement made by the Attorney General of Manitoba to hold a public inquiry into my case.
Pleased because until that day, in the eyes of the public, he was still seen as the man who got away with murder.
How do you survive on the outside when everyone looks at you and says, he got off on a technicality because the police still believe?
That's the core of that was the core of my anger. That was it. It's exactly what you said.
And how did you survive that?
I just kept it bottled up inside. I would occasionally just blow up and just get mad, just totally freak out.
DNA would finally and fully exonerate Sophonow, and a public inquiry would lead him to seek therapy for his pent-up rage.
During the inquiry, there was an individual that the commission called, Adrian Grounds from Cambridge, England. I talked to him. They diagnosed me as PTSD.
Post-traumatic
stress disorder, yes.
Disorder.
And one of the best things for me is to talk about my events and things like that to, because people, the general public, they think, well, don't talk about it, blah, 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 and say he's convicted of murder, blah, 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 blah. Don't talk about it.
The duration of the wrongful imprisonment averaged 10 years.
This is the man that helped Thomas Sophonow, Dr. Adrian Grounds, a forensic psychiatrist at the University of Cambridge. Today he's speaking in Winnipeg about the damage done to the wrongfully convicted.
For example, they may get panic attacks, nightmares, vivid memories of particular experiences, adverse experiences that they've had in prison.
You do about 4 years in prisons.
Yeah.
What was it like in there for you?
I don't talk about prison.
Why not?
I just don't talk about it.
Is it too difficult for you to go back to? It's so hard to understand how a man who knows he's innocent keeps his sanity while in prison. How do you do that?
Take one day at a time.
And there's a lot of days.
Take 1 hour at a time.
Across the country in St. John's, Newfoundland, Ron Dalton counted thousands of hours for a crime that never was. In 1989, the university-educated bank manager was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for strangling his wife of 11 years. It's been 6 years since forensic evidence proved Dalton's wife choked to death on cereal.
You're in court, and the jury says guilty. What was your reaction?
Well, I can always hear my mother there someplace in the background screeching as the jury comes back and says guilty, and half an hour later the judge passes out a life sentence and you're on your way.
And in an instant, Dalton lost everything he held dear, his children.
The worst part about being in prison was being away from them when you're used to spending every day of your life with them.
Okay.
Now we're talking.
Dalton's sister, Linda Gallant, took in his 3 children and raised them along with her own 3 children. But it would take 8.5 long years before Ron Dalton would rejoin his family as a free man.
What was it like coming home for the first time?
It was difficult to come home for the first time. My 3 children were still with my sister and her husband. I was out of prison, but I wasn't free to pick up the pieces. I couldn't set up a household and take those 3 kids back with me and start to try and catch up on some of the lost years. You still pay a price along the way,
For the first 2 years, Dalton obsessed on his appeal.
I wouldn't move them back in with me and then have to give them up again a year later if I was convicted a second time.
And Linda sees her brother's loss every time she looks into his face.
When you look at Ron and you see all that he's been through, what goes through your thoughts?
It's just a sadness. When I look at him and I remember his children, it was just a sadness there that he missed a lot.
And at the core for virtually every wrongfully convicted person is the inability to trust again. Dr. Grounds.
Some remain in a state of permanent mistrust, that sense of confidence in the stability and predictability of the world, the fact that you can rely on people, has gone forever.
How has prison changed you from the Ron Dalton before and the Ron Dalton today?
It's made me much less trusting, and it's harder to form close relationships. It's harder to trust people. You've been burned by so many people who are there, you know, the government's there to help you and the police are there to help you and that sort of thing. If you haven't done anything wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. And when you get burned by all that, then you're very skeptical about things.
Skeptical because despite an exoneration, he says he will never be totally free.
This could happen to anybody.
The stigma always sticks.
It stays there, sure. That mark of Cain is always there. You know, you're branded as a murderer at some point.
It must fester inside you.
It does if you allow it to, and you know, I can reach down and grab a little anger when I have to. There's always, you can always remember some of the things that were done and some of the unfairness and some of the injustice.
When we return,
how did you keep yourself from going crazy? You know you're innocent.
How the realities of prison life can haunt the exonerated.
I didn't think it was going to be as rough as it was.
When CTV's W5 continues.
Her Majesty's Penitentiary, located in St. John's, Newfoundland. It's Randy Druken's last night before his release. He's serving time for stealing television sets to buy drugs. In 1995, Druken was tagged with the brutal stabbing death of his 26-year-old girlfriend, Brenda Young.
What do you want most?
What I want most, I'll never be able to get, right? For things to be the way they were. But I'll settle for my life.
Druken served his sentence in the Atlantic Institution, a maximum security prison located in Renouse, New Brunswick.
There was times that, you know, I even wanted to kill myself, you know. Again, I had to think of reasons why not to.
What kind of reason would you find?
You know, I had to, you know, try to find strength in, you know, other people's, you know, the ordeals that they were going through when they were trying to survive, you know. I used to go to the library and get books on Jews that done time in concentration camps. Not that I went through anything what they went through, but, you know, the stories that they wrote helped me to get through what I was going through.
But the damage was done, and it was devastating. Another inmate in that same prison was Ron Dalton.
I know a little bit more about life in the real world, nothing about the prison world, but I know enough to keep my mouth shut and not get involved in things. And I've been in the gym when the shotgun blasts go off over your head, and I've been in the yard when shots are being fired. You don't have to be there when, you know, the cause of any problem to be a casualty along the way someplace.
I didn't think it was going to be as rough as it was. You know, when I come out of prison, I had a drug problem. A lot of things have changed.
In 1999, Randy Druken was set free. He served 6.5 years behind bars before DNA evidence eventually proved the police got the wrong man.
You've lost 6.5 years of your life for something you didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
You bitter?
At times I am, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Angry?
Yeah. The Crown that prosecuted me, he's the judge now. And I really believe that, you know, this had nothing to do with justice. It was a notch in his belt. It was a stepping stone to, you know, to a higher position for this man.
And while innocent men are carted off to jail, their convictions most times lead to promotions for the prosecutors and police officers involved in the case, says James Lockyer, lawyer and founding director of AIDWIC, the Association in Defense of the Wrongly Convicted.
So you find that when you come along 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, that your police officers have become police chiefs, police superintendents. They've come to the top of the hierarchy, in other words.
Your prosecutors have become judges.
Your Crown prosecutors have often become judges, and you suddenly find that you are trying to deal with a system that you can no longer expect to harness.
But you're looking at a system that withheld or hid exculpatory evidence, played with the evidence, and convicted the wrong guy.
And they always seem to manage to find excuses for what happened. We didn't realize this, we didn't realize that, we didn't understand the implications of this, those kinds of explanations, and certainly to date, they seem to have got away with them.
Ironically, when a convicted murderer, rapist, or drug dealer completes his sentence, he's prepared for release. He can get counseling, a halfway house, and a parole officer to guide him back into the community. But a wrongfully convicted man simply gets shown the door, and that's it. He's on his own. And that was the case for Randy Druken. While in prison, he got addicted to drugs, and when he was released, he had nowhere to turn to for help.
I got addicted to cotton MSs, which is a painkiller for cancer patients. When I come out, I was wired into morphine, and I remember there for a while, I wouldn't even do Oxycontins on the street. It didn't do nothing for me. That's how high the drug was that I was doing in jail.
Drugs, to a large extent, in my opinion at least, were with Randy as a crutch.
Bill Collins is Randy Druken's lawyer of 20 years and one of his only real friends.
Randy was ashamed of the fact that people thought that he was the killer. He was insecure in any social setting whatsoever. I think it was just a way to escape the world and possibly life.
Freedom has left Druken aimless. He's unemployed and still battling a drug addiction. An addiction so strong, it's taken him in and out of jail 4 more times.
Each time I come back, it was because of drugs, you know. And there was times I asked the courts to put me in jail to get off this problem, to get away from this, you know, this drug problem.
And that's just not good enough for James Lockyer. He says the government has a responsibility to these men.
What should be in place for these people once they're released?
They obviously need a social help from professionals, and those professionals, it seems to me, should be provided by and paid for by the state. The other way the state can and should help is by providing compensation.
Of about 30 wrongful convictions in Canada, so far only about a dozen men have received a cash settlement for their time in prison. But getting compensation has always been and continues to be an uphill struggle. And that's the case for Ron Dalton.
Compensation is the way governments apologize. They apologize with their checkbooks. An apology, a formal acknowledgement of innocence would be nice, but governments rarely do that as well.
Free once again, Randy Druken desperately wants to straighten out his life, but he's got one very big mountain to climb.
How are you going to keep yourself from going back?
I gotta do it this time. He's gonna kill me.
Do you want to be compensated for your time in prison?
I often thought of that, you know, if I was, what way would I go about it? You know, would that be my downfall with a drug problem? And, you know, but I deserve to be compensated, yes.
You did not do it.
No, I didn't.
And while it's been 20 years since Thomas Sophonow walked out of prison a free man, his past continues to haunt him. In 2003, he was awarded $2.6 million in compensation, 17 years after his release. But the time spent in jail for a crime he didn't commit can never be repaid.
You're exonerated?
Yes.
Do you still feel like an outsider?
No, not really. I'd say about 85%.
So 15% of the stigma still stays?
Mm-hmm.
You think it will ever all go away?
I don't know.
And the compensation doesn't pay for all the years?
No. No. Actually, no. Tell you the truth, no compensation would pay for all the years.
W5 will be right back.